In a significant shift in North American geopolitics, a series of structural transformations within the Canadian government has fundamentally altered the power dynamic between Washington and Ottawa. For years, the United States maintained a pressure strategy built upon the premise of Canadian political vulnerability. Specifically, 18 months ago, Canada was defined by a minority government struggling to maintain power through fragile coalition agreements, a divided political landscape, and record-low approval ratings for then Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. This internal instability served as a primary target for Donald Trump's political playbook, which, historically, seeks to exploit the fault lines and internal disagreements of opposing administrations to extract concessions. However, the strategic environment changed decisively on March 23, 2025, when Mark Carney was sworn in as Prime Minister. Carney, a former governor of both the Bank of Canada and the Bank of England, represents a shift from conventional political leadership to a systems-oriented approach. Known for his role in architecting global responses to the 2008 financial crisis, Carney has moved Canada away from reactive diplomacy and toward a framework of structural logic. When the Trump administration applied a serious round of tariffs in early 2025, the Carney government did not respond with the expected panic or pleas for negotiation. Instead, Ottawa implemented a precise, measured counter-framework designed for long-term endurance, signaling a departure from the news cycle-driven politics that the White House had previously leveraged to its advantage. The stability of the Canadian government has been further reinforced by an unprecedented wave of floor crossings within the House of Commons, effectively neutralizing the primary pressure points utilized by external actors. While Prime Minister Mark Carney consolidated executive authority, the opposition Conservative caucus, led by Pierre Poilievre, began to fragment. This internal collapse saw multiple members of Parliament from various regions and ideological backgrounds defecting from the Conservative Party. Internal sources indicate these departures were driven by a restrictive environment where independent thought was discouraged in favor of strict central control. This chain reaction of defections has fundamentally weakened the opposition's ability to challenge the government's mandate or serve as a lever for American diplomatic pressure. As the opposition structure eroded, many departing members aligned themselves with the Carney administration, granting the government cross-partisan legitimacy and a broader political base. Simultaneously, the Carney government activated a pre-designed contingency architecture to reduce economic dependency on the United States. This strategic pivot included accelerating trade diversification with the European Union and the United Kingdom, as well as advancing substantive negotiations with Indo-Pacific partners such as India, Japan, and South Korea. Domestically, Canadian procurement policies were systematically updated to favor non-American suppliers in critical sectors. These actions represent a structural reorganization of the Canadian economy, moving away from a posture of negotiation toward one of permanent strategic autonomy. Public sentiment within Canada has mirrored this institutional shift. Recent polling data indicates a surge in support for Canadian-made products and a widespread consumer movement toward reducing brand dependency on American goods. Prime Minister Carney's approval ratings have seen a documented increase, correlating directly with his firm stance against Washington's economic directives. This national consolidation of identity has rendered traditional pressure tactics, such as the threat of tariffs or border restrictions, less effective. Analysts note that the current silence from the White House regarding Canadian trade suggests a recognition that previous strategies have failed to produce the intended concessions, as the Canadian target has evolved into a more unified and strategically positioned entity. The structural transformation in Ottawa is now manifesting as a broad geopolitical precedent, with major global allies, including the European Union, Japan, and Australia, monitoring Canada's ability to withstand sustained economic coercion from Washington. This shift carries direct implications for the United States, which maintains a $900 billion annual trade relationship with Canada. Over 400,000 American jobs are directly tied to Canadian market access, particularly in border states such as Michigan, Ohio, and New York. As the Carney administration accelerates its diversification strategy, The resulting shifts in procurement and consumer behavior are beginning to impact American supply chains and corporate quarterly earnings, transforming a diplomatic standoff into a tangible economic reality for American manufacturers and workers. Furthermore, Canada remains the primary foreign supplier of essential energy resources to the United States, providing approximately 60% of uranium imports, the largest share of foreign crude oil, and a critical supply of natural gas for domestic heating and industry. While the Carney government has exercised restraint in utilizing these energy exports as explicit leverage, the underlying reality of American exposure is a central concern for trade analysts in Washington. The paradox of the current U.S.
strategy is that every round of economic pressure applied by the White House has historically provided Prime Minister Carney with greater domestic political capital, further fueling the Canadian public's move toward economic nationalism and reducing American influence over Canadian policy. Current projections for the bilateral relationship suggest three potential trajectories: a complete consolidation of the Canadian majority that removes all remaining structural vulnerabilities, a prolonged economic standoff where both nations absorb mounting costs in energy and manufacturing, or an external global shock that forces a recalibration of priorities. Under the leadership of Mark Carney, the Canadian government has transitioned from a fragmented target into a consolidated negotiating bloc. As both nations navigate this reorganized power dynamic, the effectiveness of traditional American pressure tactics remains under scrutiny. For more updates on this developing situation and its impact on North American trade, subscribe to our channel and stay informed on the latest strategic shifts. Tell us in the comments which trajectory you believe is currently in motion.